tacked on at the end, which was Rishi Sunak saying, sorry about this, we'll get it right in the end, but right now we're doing what the boss says. And he's promised tax cuts before the next election. But that's going to be very difficult to deliver. As you've just explained, there are so many variables here. The monster of inflation is out of the cage. It's impossible to control it. People are forecasting it's going to stay at around 4.5%, some people. Others are saying that it's going to go up to 6 or 7 or 8 or beyond. And once inflation begins to get a grip, it's almost impossible to control it. And already you're seeing the mortgage rates rising. You're seeing the threat of basic interest rates rising, with a bank about to hike them by around 1% over the next year or so. And I think that the idea that this is going to be a high-wage, high-growth economy is completely ditched by the fact that inflation will gnaw away at all of the pay rises that people get. They won't keep pace with inflation. And I think that the tax increases which will come home to hit ordinary pockets next year will wipe all of the good news, all of the cheers from yesterday or from Budget Day off the front pages.
Was it credible?
The budget, no, it simply didn't add up, and immediately it was open to close scrutiny. All of the anomalies were clear for everyone to see. You and I have covered budgets now for probably nearly 40 years, one way or another, either in politics or as industrial reporters. And frankly, what was done in 1979 and onwards set Britain on the path to 30 years of unbroken economic growth. It was basically good housekeeping. This is a good squandering of money. This is squandering of billions upon billions of taxpayers' money before the money is even raised. All this money that's being poured into the health service with promises that it will cease after 3 years and then be diverted to social care is total pie in the sky. The NHS is not going to give up its extra 12 billion a year, and social care will have to be paid for out of still higher taxes. And I think that is the spiral we face, not a nice, easy landing, a soft landing in time for the election. And I think that the Conservative backbenchers, which, as you say, cheered on the day, are already worried, very seriously worried about where they're headed.
And poised, perhaps, come the moment to rally around Sunak, quoting back to him those last little bits that I quoted both times, a moral case for a smaller state. Thatcher could have written that.
Yes, and I think that what you see at the moment is Boris reigns supreme because he is a proven election winner. Even this budget, which I think doesn't bear close scrutiny, is being applauded by the public by a margin of more than 50%. This is one of those budgets which is applauded on the day and is catastrophic as time passes. And I think that by the time we've looked at it over the coming 12 months, we're going to see the gaping flaws, and the people of this country are going to feel it in their pockets.
Just a couple of quick ones, if I may, on Labour. I was seriously impressed by Rachel Reeves, who, as I said at the beginning, only had 45 minutes to get together because Starmer was on sick leave. But that comment about fair tax and cautious spending was spot on, but to me also represented quite a significant shift for Labour, a real line under not only the Michael Foot days that you and I know so well, but also the Jeremy Corbyn days.
Yes, like you, Alistair, I was impressed by Rachel Reeves. She was very calm, very cool and collected, and managed to marshal her arguments extremely adroitly with such a limited time. That's one of the toughest jobs in politics, is responding to a budget that you haven't had a chance to look at and study and think about the implications. And I suggest we should watch very carefully the Labour Party in the coming weeks and months. You've had the Labour Party conference. You've had Keir Starmer reassert himself with Angela Rayner over the appalling slur that Tory voters, including Sun readers, are scum. And she's backpedaled at 100 miles an hour. Now, watch very carefully. What Rachel Reeves had to say was, I think, just the beginning of a repositioning.
Yeah.
What you've had is the Tories pinching Labour clothes and now riding down the road of socialist economic policy. And I think that the Tories, the Labour Party, is going to do something different. I think it's going to start pinching Tory clothes and start establishing itself as a party of economic gravitas. And just watch a number of things. The Labour Party will start burning a number of policies that have been hung round its neck for the last 10 years, and in the last 5 years in particular. They're changing tack, and it's going to work.
Final one, and fairly quickly, if we could, Trevor. How about 2024, Rachel Reeves, as you've just defined her, versus Rishi Sunak, back to something closer to the Thatcherite years? Game on.
Well, I think we'd be lucky if it lasted till 2024. I'd be very surprised. I think 2023 is more likely. I think Boris will want to go as soon as he sees a way through. They're going to change the fixed-term Parliament rules. And I think, actually, that Rachel Reeves has been identified as the rising star of the Labour Party. She knows what she's talking about. She's a former Bank of England economist. She knows what the economics are all about. And she has proven in the last few days that she can take this government on. Rishi Sunak is as yet an untested quantity, but I think he's going to have to assert himself and will assert himself in the weeks and months before the next election.
Great to talk to you, Trevor. Thank you for your time this evening. Trevor Kavanagh there, former political editor of the Sun newspaper and an old chum of mine in the industrial correspondent days. Now, smoking, a rapidly declining pastime, but still pretty well accepted as one of the most potent killers freely available on the high street. Of the 7 million or so smokers still around, those who want to give up have a range of tools available to them. Their own determination, patches, and a good talking to from their GP, or, if they can get hold of them on the phone, or they can't get hold of them on the phone, with an NHS help centre. But for many, there is a middle ground, vaping or e-cigarettes. For some, they're a safe substitute. For others, they're a road to giving up. So far, it's claimed that vaping has helped around 50,000 quit. The big talking point is that they might now be prescribed by GPs if they pass muster. The Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency has given e-cigarettes the thumbs up, in principle. Manufacturers must now submit specific products for approval. The science is mixed. Some are big fans, some remain dubious. There are also concerns that smaller companies making possibly better products won't have the resources of the big multinational manufacturers to get over the regulatory hurdles. They certainly don't have the lobbying resources. Well, to discuss the pros and cons of this and more, I'm delighted to be joined by oncologist Carol Sikora. Carol, great to see you. First, the science. Are you happy that e-cigarettes are safe?
Yes, I'm happy they're safe. There are about 3,000 people, mainly in the States, have had problems, but they're safe. And they certainly don't give you cancer, which is obviously what cigarettes do. And that's my field of specialism. So I think the problem we've got with this whole business is that a few people think they're going to be able to get on some NHS website and order a pack of vapes, and a pack of e-cigarettes. There are two forms, the vapes, which come in tubes of various sorts, containers, and then there's the cigarettes that look just like cigarettes that you throw away. And one of the problems is they're very attractive to young people, school pupils, teens and so on. They're using them because they can buy them. And that's the problem. So it's really quite mixed. As you say, Alistair, to get a product to be registered with our regulatory agency, the MHRA, you have to put a lot of money in, probably £500,000. Now, the small makers can't do that. So it'll be smoking companies, cigarette companies that will do that and brand them and then sell them. So the total picture is very confusing. Sure. I mean, I'd like someone to say, look, you're drinking too much wine, Carol. Why don't we send you some bottles of wine tomorrow? And you just drink less now. We'll give it you free if you drink less. But it's not going to happen. I know.
No, it's not. Well, and it takes me neatly to my next point. Why are we as taxpayers poised to spend even more for those who simply don't have strong enough will? They know it kills them. Give up.
You're right. And you could say, well, maybe the cost of lung cancer on the NHS is disastrous. It's not, because people die. That's the problem with smoking-related cancer. It's bad prognosis, bad outcomes. So the idea that somehow you're going to save money in the end, you go around care homes, there are no smokers in care homes because they don't live that long. And that is the problem. It's a balance. Obviously, we want to help people. And I think the way this is going to end up is very much people will be offered a package, which won't just be a few vape cigarettes or e-cigarettes. It'll be a package of counseling, of maybe some tablets to prevent addiction and so on. Everybody can give up if they want to. It may be difficult, it may be challenging, and e-cigarettes may be part of that process, but it's not the only solution. It's going to have to be a time-limited, maybe a 3-month period where you go to an NHS facility, you're given stuff, and you can smoke it, but in the end, you're going to have to give up everything, and that's the deal that's going to be made.
I've known you long enough to know that you're a bit of a philosopher as well as a profoundly brilliant medic. I'm going to ask you a tricky question to end on. Is there no limit to our hopes and expectations on extending life when it comes to clever tricks like e-cigarettes or brand new drugs that come on the market? We just seem to want to keep extending life as long as possible, whatever the cost. Doesn't that deserve a little more profound thought?
I think the problem in Western medicine and Western society in general is death is not allowed. We've got to keep going. You go to Asian societies in rural Asia, people expect death is normal. I mean, I remember vividly when I was in the WHO seeing a man die in a Thailand village on the border with Cambodia. And he was dying, and the family were there, the chickens were running around, the kids were there, the grandchildren, and it was part of the normal process. We've forgotten about how to do that. And so extending life at all costs has become essential. And that is one of the problems. The cost of the medications I give now are very high. And maybe you should say, that's it, let's go live in peace. And quality of life is more important than length of life. But, nowadays we can't say that.
Yeah. Well, no, we can't. But I tell you what, I'd love to talk to you about it at greater length. Come back on this programme, either with me or Colin, if he's interested as well, or you and I will have that debate in open, in public, one weekend soon. Carol Sikora, always a pleasure, always enlightening. Thank you so much. Wow, maybe we do need to have that debate. Now, change of tack. Roger Daltrey of The who hoped he'd die before he got old, also sang in 1965, I'm a man, but my ma won't admit it. I was 13 when I bought that record, but hadn't got a clue what it really meant. Some years later, when I was an undergraduate, I led the National Union of Students campaign on gay rights. On reflection, it was all pretty obvious. Some men loved men, and some women loved women. It was a question of sexual preference, not gender or science or chromosomes. Now, the true meaning of Daltrey's I'm a man is all the clearer. Some people feel that they've been born the wrong sex. There are many who feel that this is biological nonsense. They quote chromosomes and biology, as I just did. Just because you feel different, etc., goes the argument. For those who feel this way, however, it's profound. In their minds, they know that they are not what they were born. And it's not the stuff of gentle, understanding debate. It's divided society, it's split groups campaigning on gay rights, a movement that's become so complex it's now known as the LGBTQ+ movement. Tactically, it's also been brutal. The most recent example is the fierce hounding by students of the Sussex University philosophy professor Kathleen Stock. Stock said, people cannot change their biological sex. Her critics say that's harsh transphobia. Stock has now resigned to reflect on her options. A philosophy professor expressing a view out. There's an irony in that. Joining me to discuss this is an old friend of mine, Peter Tatchell, perhaps one of the best-known gay rights campaigners who I got to know in those early days when it was just a fledgling movement. I mean, first of all, to be clear, after all those letters, Peter, are you still a gay rights campaigner, or has that fundamentally moved across the whole piece?
I've always been a campaigner for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender rights. I have been supporting the trans community for 50 years, and I'm very proud to continue to do so.
So, given that, don't we need a calmer educational debate rather than pitched battles that get rid of professors?
Absolutely. The debate is far too toxic. It doesn't help anybody. We do need to calm down and be respectful of each other. But I think it's also right that trans people do feel very distressed and offended by some of the things that Kathleen Stock has said. They have a right to protest against her peacefully. And indeed, Kathleen Stock herself has said that she accepts the right of students to protest against her. I think when it goes to the realm of threats, intimidation, and harassment, that is too far.
Yeah.
But I've also got to add that it does work both ways. I mean, it's true there is a minority who have subjected Kathleen Stock to threats and intimidation, and that's wrong.
Sure.
But there's also a minority of people who support her point of view who have done the same intimidation and threats against trans people and trans allies like me. We have had people who support Kathleen Stock's views say that we should be killed, castrated, and raped. Now, that's not what Kathleen Stock says, but some of the people who support her point of view, some extreme people who support her point of view, have expressed those things. So I think all these threats have to stop. We've got to have a calm debate. We've got to recognize that there are two different things here. There is biological sex and gender identity. In my view, both are valid. But Kathleen Stock has said we mustn't let gender outweigh sex. And, totally, no one disagrees with that. What we're saying is gender identity and biological sex are two equally valid things for which there should be respect.
I agree with everything that you just said there, Peter, and thank you for breaking into your evening to share them with me and the people kind enough to listen to it. We'll continue this conversation as we go. Peter Tatchell there calling for a calmer debate on something that for folk is fundamental and very sensitive as well, but shouting and screaming on either side really achieve absolutely zilch. Coming up, the fishing row continues with the UK and France. More on that after the break.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
The fishing wars continue. British captain Cornelis Gert-Jan has been charged by French authorities in a row over licences after Environment Secretary George Eustace said two can play at that game following France's threat to block ports. And the French ambassador's been summoned as tensions continue to escalate. The row kicked off after the UK refused to give licences to 55 French fishing vessels to fish in UK waters because they didn't meet the requirements. So, what's next for the two feuding nations? As the Prime Minister said, he will do whatever it takes to defend UK interests. Joining me now is Tory MP Andrew Bridgen. Andrew, always good to see you. Now, bear with me, we'll come to the Trafalgar 2 bit in a moment. But first, isn't this France playing silly games and us falling for it?
Well, it's clear that President Macron sees political advantage in picking a fight with the UK over fish 6 months out from presidential elections where he's struggling in the polls. But the fact is that this is the long run of events involving the UK, which President Macron didn't agree with, things we've done, and things that he sees as probably damaged his re-election prospects and his popularity in his own country. So we've had, obviously, the Brexit vote itself, which he deeply opposed. We've had the overwhelming success of the UK Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which was an embarrassment to Macron because the 2 French vaccines sponsored by the French government failed in trials. And also, very recently, you've got the bypassing of the French diesel submarine deal with the Australians and us and the Americans supplying them with nuclear technology. That's really annoyed Macron, and it's certainly, he believes, damaged his standing in his own country. He's out for revenge, in a way. And as I said in the chamber only a couple of days ago, I fear, with 6 months to go and a tight election for President Macron, this is going to get worse before it gets better.
George Eustace, the Environment Secretary, is talking about the Royal Navy. Boris Johnson saying just a few hours ago, we will do whatever it takes to defend UK interests. Have the French now crossed the line with that arrest? I mean, impounding a ship's one thing, but arresting the captain's another.
Well, they weren't really interested in arresting him because, well, they've not asked him to appear in court until next August. I mean, it wasn't that serious. But clearly, we're seeing an escalation. I think what's more worrying is that Macron's threatening unilateral action by France with regard to checks on lorries, imports, exports, threatening to cut off electricity supplies to the Channel Islands. And basically, if any dispute between the UK and an EU member, we have a disputes system and that's all laid out. And he's looking to basically bypass that and take unilateral action. We would be looking for the EU to step in and rein Macron in. But given that he's now probably the longest standing and most powerful leader in the EU, I wouldn't bank on it.
Sure. I'm old enough to remember the Cod War between the United Kingdom and Iceland way back when. But that's evidence that if push does come to shove, this thing could get out of hand.
It could, and obviously the Channel is the busiest waterway in the world, and we wouldn't want to see that because that would be a potentially major disruption to world trade, not just to fishing. But I mean, this is a lot of political posturing by the French, who it is going to get worse before it gets better unless Macron suddenly leaps up in the polls.
Final point to you, of course, it's all on both sides steeped in that in the final Brexit deal. This was one of the most complex and, as you rightly said at the beginning of our conversation, resisted bits of the deal. Haven't we slightly weakened our hand, Andrew, by flogging off half of our quota and our fishing rights?
Yes, we have, but we're taking back more quota each year for 5 years, and our industry couldn't, because it's been run down over decades, we couldn't fish all the fish in our waters in one go. We need those 5 years to rebuild our industry. And it isn't just the fishing fleet. We need to be able to process that fish when it's landed in UK ports. It needs to be distributed. That all has to be built up, knowing that we're going to get more quota each year for 5 years.
All right, Andrew, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for breaking into your evening to spend time with us on GB News. Andrew Bridgen there, the Conservative Member of Parliament. Now, we're going to stick with fish because a group of marine and fisheries experts have come together to convince the World Trade Organization and its 164 member countries to ban harmful fishery subsidies that have crippled small-scale fishers. The group of scientists from all over the world are urging the WTO to make this commitment before it's too late. Ahead of COP26, these experts feel that it is time to take action and protect livelihoods, but also reverse the damage caused to ocean ecosystem. So the timing is, in a sense, perfect. But what does it really mean? Joining us now to tell us more is Rasheed Somalia, who is the lead author representing nearly 300 contributors who've joined forces to approach the WTO with that proposition. Great to see you, Rasheed. Thanks very much indeed. First of all, new readers start here. What exactly are these subsidies that you're worried about?
These are government taxpayer money given to the fishing sector around the world, and a lot of them really actually lead to overfishing. And we're talking about something like fuel subsidies, right? In Britain, diesel is being subsidized, for example. And so we're talking about $35 billion a year globally that is being advanced. And 22 billion of these are those that lead to overcapacity and overfishing. So people fish more than they would in a working market system. And that's why so many scientists say we need to remove them.
Sure. So essentially it's unpicking the evolution of big industrial fishing and going back in time to when it was a coastal village economic pastime that everybody benefited from. That's where you want to go back to.
Absolutely. I mean, at least we need to recapture that. We need to. And these subsidies don't allow us to do that. Apart from the harm they do to the biodiversity and to the future of fish for people and jobs for coastal people, a bulk of the subsidies actually go to large-scale industrial fleet. For example, in the UK, it's mostly tax rebates on diesel, and coastal small fleets don't use much diesel. They use petrol, and they don't get the subsidies. So 87% of the subsidies given by the UK go to large industrial fleet. This is almost like taking the fish out of the mouths of the coastal people in Britain, and this is a big issue, and we are concerned about that big time.
As scientists, what's your answer to the economists and the business people who say, but we've got to have it this way if we're going to guarantee the volumes of fish that folk want at the prices that they're prepared to pay?
The thing is, fish is given to us by nature, basically, right? We do some fish farming, but even a lot of those depend on wild fish as fish meal and oil. So we have to work with nature. Nature doesn't just give you feed because you want it. So by taking those volumes, we are actually taking away fish for future generation, future coastal people, and we're depriving them from what I call infinity fish. This is the title of a book I just published a week ago, Infinity Fish. And the whole idea is if we take out these harmful subsidies and manage our fisheries well, they can continue to support our coastal communities, feed people through time. And anything that does to you, the benefit to society is infinity. So that is what these subsidies are blocking us from doing. So
it's a wonderful concept, and which I find very attractive, being a great fish lover myself. But the other thing those business folk and economists are going to throw at you is supply chain. If we try and turn our sights back to those lovely coastal village communities that you're talking about, their take has got to be got to market from thousands of small sites rather than several great big chunky fishing areas. Have you got an answer to that?
The thing is, we are talking about smart, small-scale coastal fisheries here. In BC here, in British Columbia, where I'm based in Vancouver, we have the British Columbia Young Fishers Association, and they are bringing in technology. They are bringing processing in very modern ways. I love them because it's not like what we do hundreds of years ago. You can bring in handsome, beautiful technology to help us achieve all these things without sucking up the ocean. And this is where I think the world needs to go, UK needs to go, so that we can continue to have infinity fish.
Rasheed Somalia, thank you so much, and keep in touch. Let us know what progress you make with the WTO. You paint a very attractive picture. If we can answer those economic and industrial answers, then, God willing, it might just work. Absolutely brilliant. Coming up, can the world reach our climate targets by 2030? I'll be speaking to the Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch right after this break.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
COP26 this weekend. New research shows that the world will need to shut down nearly 3,000 coal-fired power plants before 2030 if it really wants to curb temperatures within 1.5 degrees Celsius. A report published by the think tank Transition Zero showed that nearly 1,000 gigawatts of coal-fired power would need to be slashed to meet targets. And this burden will fall on China, who's the owner of around half the world's coal-fueled plants, and other emerging developing economies. China's reduced the share of coal from 72.4% in 2005 to 56.8% last year. Still big. China's President Xi Jinping has vowed earlier this year that China would start to cut coal use, but only after 2025. So is this target truly achievable for countries like China, or are Western powers being idealistic? Joining me now is the Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Mumford. Andrew, good to see you. Boris Johnson's already knows that it's going to be difficult to make COP26 more than a talking shop. Is China and coal the true fundamental reason for that?
I think, yes. There's two aspects to this. One is that China and the other developing nations, in particular India, are never going to be able to get away from coal simply because renewables are too expensive for them. And particularly the Chinese have a very tenuous grasp on power. They're a communist dictatorship. If they don't continue to develop the country economically and to improve people, they will probably be overthrown. So they know that, and they know that the way they do that is continuing to deliver coal-fired power. The other aspect, though, that is important to understand is that there isn't really any way we can get away from fossil fuels. There is no way to balance an electricity grid anywhere in the world without fossil fuels. It's only fossil fuels that can deliver that dispatchable power you can get when you need it. The one exception to that, I should add, is hydro. Some countries which have a lot of hydro can do without. Most countries can't, and certainly we in the UK can't. So to come back to your real point, no, COP26 is going to be a flop. There's nothing Boris Johnson can do about it.
I want to come back to the second bit about not being able to get away from fossil fuel in just a moment. But I first of all want to ask you something that, as it were, mops up the philosophy of it, because I feel this very, very strongly. COP26 and all of these efforts, and I was in Rio in 1992 at the first Earth Summit, so with respect, I know what I'm talking about. This has always been a case of the big, successful, industrialised countries who've got it all, telling those who want it all they can't have it because it's going to ruin the world.
Yeah, it is utterly immoral, really. The developed world has been doing this for a long time, telling African countries that they shouldn't develop their fossil fuel resources because it will be bad for the planet. I don't see how anybody could look a poor African person in the eye and say that to them. These people need fossil fuels badly.
And the second point that you raised there, and I quote you back, we cannot get away from fossil fuels, with the slight exception occasionally of wind power, and we all know what the problems are.
Hydro, I said, yeah.
I mean, so in effect, although governments, not least Boris Johnson's UK government, are saying time is running out, and Margaret Beckett was saying it over a decade ago, 2 decades back, we've got the money to invest in things like carbon capture and storage and alternatives. These emerging economies get hit twice because they don't have the wealth to do those alternatives.
Yeah, and people wave their hands and say that yes, we should give them these technologies. The problem is that these technologies aren't really off the drawing board yet. Carbon capture and storage is something they're talked about a lot, and there have been some pilot plants have been put up around the world, but they've been dismal failures, and most of them have closed. Carbon capture and storage is a nice idea. It's very hard to get to work for coal, and it's even harder to get to work for natural gas, which is what we would need here in the developed world. So people talk about batteries. I mean, these are far too expensive to be deployed even in the Western world. People talk about hydrogen, which has exactly the same problem, far too expensive. And no relevance to the developing world at all because they just don't have the money to do it. So I think we need to, in this country, need to sort of cut through the hype about technologies that are coming down the line. We need to look at what we've got now, what can be done now. And the answer is there's very little zero carbon technology that we can deploy now that works in its own right. We're deploying wind farms and solar power, but we are rapidly hitting the point where if we don't keep our gas-fired power stations running, then we won't be able to balance the grid anymore, and we're in big trouble.
We're in big trouble, full stop, then?
We are in big trouble, full stop, at least in terms of the electricity system. Yeah, for me, as somebody who likes to question all aspects of this, I look around the world and I see people say that the climate emergency. I don't know what they're talking about. Look, there's a lovely picture of some floods. We've always had floods. Are floods getting worse? Well, if you listen to the IPCC, there's very little evidence that floods are getting worse. Wildfires. You actually look at the data on wildfires. It's very good of you to me these pictures. The data on wildfires shows that the area around the world each year has been declining for the best part of a century. So again, the fact that people are willing to show you these scary pictures doesn't prove a point. You have to go and look at the data. And the data is rather inconclusive. I was looking at some very interesting data today about hurricanes in Bangladesh.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I apologise.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I have to butt in because I've just noticed we've only got 9 minutes left on the whole programme. We could do all of it, but that would be unfair on my next guest as well. But I'm going to talk to you again because I think we were getting to a quite profound point there as well. But I completely buy into what you were saying about the greedy economic outlook of the developed countries at the expense of others. That was a point well made. Let's talk about the rest on another occasion. For the time being, Andrew Mumford, thank you very much indeed. Andrew's the Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch. Absolutely intriguing and radical things. Culture clash now, a must on the Brazier programme, and police force in the north of England is trying to discourage children from trick-or-treating this Halloween because of COVID-19. South Yorkshire police have produced a poster residents can print out and put in their windows saying, "No trick-or-treaters," with the picture of a silhouetted pumpkin crossed out, rather like a no-entry sign. The police force said this year our communities will be celebrating Halloween and Bonfire Night differently. Organised events have been cancelled due to COVID-19 and trick-or-treating is being discouraged. Well, the poster has been widely mocked on social media, being branded as a killjoy. We have the chief political writer for Spiked, Brendan ONeill, to talk about this and a little bit more as well now. As night follows day, Brendan, this was going to happen. But do you understand at all where the police in Yorkshire are coming from?
I'm afraid I don't, actually. And the idea that COVID-19 is a risk from a kid knocking on a door and standing in front of someone for 10 seconds to take some sweets of them, I mean, that just seems a bit of a stretch. That doesn't seem to me to be the kind of situation in which COVID-19 might spread and in which disease might take hold. I think there is a strong element of killjoyism here. We are getting over the pandemic. We have a hugely vaccinated population. We have growing herd immunity. I think now is the time for us to relax and for kids to enjoy something like Halloween so that they can get back to normal life post-lockdown.
Well, the point that you make about herd immunity was, funnily enough, was the first point that crossed my mind when I read this story, because it is known that kids can be carriers, but are unlikely to become ill. But as in a sense, so if they're carriers, they could be boosting herd immunity quite safely. So trick or treat should be encouraged, not banned.
Not a bad idea at all. Send kids out as much as possible to spread their germs, as kids always have done. But I think the key point here is that, lots of people have raised the question of what the police are up to. Surely the police have better things to do than to talk about trick and treat, and to encourage people to stay at home on Halloween. For example, they could be clearing Insulate Britain protesters off the roads and allowing people to get on with their lives. They could be investigating burglaries. They could be looking into knife crime. There are huge issues of crime and disorder in this country that the police should be focusing on rather than killing joy on Halloween.
Well, you will remember as well as I do that drones were sent up to film people in the Lake District, and they accepted that they were wrong. I mean, if it came from Sage or someone else, we might just take it a little more seriously, but from the police, I think not. We've got a few minutes left, and I said in the introduction, Brendan, we were going to talk about that, which we have done, parked. Had a fascinating conversation with Peter Tatchell, who said on transphobia and what happened down at Sussex University, Tatchell said we need a calmer and more profound debate. He didn't say it's a slam dunk, you must agree with me, we need a debate. Your thoughts on that?
I think what's happened to Kathleen Stock at Sussex University is an absolute disgrace. This has been a witch hunt. She has been treated as a witch, and in fact, one of the groups that has hounded her and argued that she should be thrown off campus, they responded to her resignation by saying, "Ding dong, the witch is dead." This was a highly intolerant, censorious, misogynistic campaign to punish a professor simply because she believes in biological sex and she thinks same-sex attraction and women's sex-based rights are important things for us to talk about. This really shows the growth of an extreme intolerance in the trans movement, unfortunately, and women are bearing the brunt of it.
We're going to have to leave it there, but thanks for those thoughts, Brendan ONeill there. That's it for tonight. Next up, it's Tonight Live with Mark Dolan. I'm back at the weekend. Until then, a very good evening to you.
Hello, we've seen some exceptional rainfall totals over recent days, and we have yet more rain in the forecast. So a number of weather warnings are in force right the way through this weekend and into the start of next week. And the reason things are quite so unsettled is this large area of low pressure in the Atlantic, and it's sweeping weather fronts right the way across the country. And tonight is no exception. Yet another weather front waiting in the wings. Some really heavy downpours associated with this one, particularly through the tonight across western parts of the country. Because of all the cloud associated with this weather front,